Okay, so, and now we are going to bring to the podium something that is near and dear to any Army aviator's heart, and that's safety. I still cannot look at my watch without seeing an orange dot in the center of it. You know, there's been no orange dot there for years, but that's inculcated in us. So now I'm going to ask the Director of Army Safety and the Commanding General of the Combat Readiness Center at Fort Rucker, Brigadier General Timothy J. Daugherty, to join me. There you are.
Hey, how's it going? How's everyone doing? So I'll start with in the slide you see in the upper right-hand corner. I've had the distinct privilege in my career to kind of come full circle. What you see in the upper right-hand corner is probably the most powerful lesson in learning that I have had in my military career. I was a brand new second lieutenant right before Desert Storm. I named Bill Nash was my brigade commander and wore the spearhead patch today. And what we had is right prior to LD, a bunch of weak-minded, strong-backed artillerymen was building a bunker. Bunker looked good to me. Bunker looked big. Bunker looked thick. But one day we were inside a meeting, and you kind of hear a rumbling happening out in the area, and we all rushed to that bunker, and there had been some pretty heavy rain there just prior to LD, and that bunker had collapsed, and that killed those 2 NCOs that day. And I asked myself, looking at that moment, and I have asked myself numerous times in my career and tried to make a difference, what was the fault that day? And the fault that day was leader presence. And to me, that is divided into really 3 categories. It's about presence, knowledge, and gumption, the willingness to engage, right? So they probably had the gumption, I think. They were there present watching it, but they did not have the knowledge. So that'll be probably one of the key foot stomp themes that I'm going to try to walk through as we're giving this brief today. As you're looking for the one hole that we can make a difference on inside safety, I would say the top of that list would be leader engagement to those 3 categories. I would like to highlight that I am an artilleryman by trade. If anybody has any detailed aviation questions, I look forward to you finding an aviator that wants to answer those after this meeting. I will tell you that I was in a meeting yesterday, and General Gaylor had me sitting on this panel in case there was a safety question, and you have trained me well, because he was saying, hey, TD, what's that stick that we wiggle all the time over there to the right? And I was able to answer that question for him and tell him what it was, so it was good. All right, next slide is going to be a little video we're going to run. So I show that slide really to make one simple point. We don't do any of that at the Combat Readiness Center / Safety Center. The most dangerous thing that I've done of late was my wife and I drank a bottle of red wine and white wine a couple weeks ago, and it gave me a headache. But what I think that video is very symbolic of is what we do for a living is complicated. What we do for a living is dangerous. What we do for a living is moving large things around the battlefield that are designed to hurt people. So if we do not take every opportunity to train like we fight, do tough, realistic training, and then also inculcate the concept of risk management to eliminate those preventive accidents that are happening, then we're missing the opportunity, because the risk is going to remain. We have to reduce risk as much as our training and operational op-tempo allows us to. Next slide. So these are slides that are very close to slides that I brief the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff each month on. I'll kind of orient you to the slide a little bit. In the upper left-hand corner, you can kind of flow that we're trying to give you a by-year comparison. That number 5 for 18, as an example, is the number of fatalities. That number 11 is the number of Class A accidents. If you just transition to 19, you can see that we've had no fatalities so far this year, 5 accidents. That 3 means how many more that we can have and meet our objective for this year. If you go to the right-hand column, that gives you some year-to-date rates per 100,000 flight hours. You can see that comparatively with 19 and 18, we're remaining under the glide path, and we're doing better this year comparatively than last year. In the lower left-hand corner, we give you a little bit of analysis. I think it's a powerful statement for our aviation community that we've not had any fatalities this year. Of the 5 accidents that we have had this year, 2 of them are material issues, which is also, I think, a powerful comment to our safety community and what a great job everyone is doing. The right hand is some of those initiatives that we have in place where we are still trying to continue to reduce risk. One of my favorite quotes, as you're looking at identifying risk and trying to do the concept of doing an analysis, well, we only lost 3. That's not good enough. There's a poem called I Am Not Resigned by Edna St. Vincent Millay, and it talks about I am not willing to accept that. And as long as we have preventable risk, there'll be a median there that we're going to seek that we're never going to be really happy. But we also have to do some analysis to say we think that some of the things that you are doing in the field are absolutely making a difference. Next slide. As a ground guy, I wanted to show this slide because we lose more soldiers each year, to include our aviation community, from ground accidents that we do in the air. The slide is arranged basically the same way. You'll see that last year we had 22 fatalities in 18, 11 thus far this year. Last year we had 36 Class A ground. This year we had 11 so far. Moving to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that we're still doing comparatively very well. That number seems small, but that is a powerful number when you're comparing that 0.0334 I think we're at now versus 0.045 from last year. So again, the field is doing well, but I am not resigned. There is improvement that we can all make to do better. The lower left-hand corner, probably after this brief today, we'll probably kind of start packaging this a little bit more, but I want to give a quick synopsis of kind of what accidents that we are seeing, what accidents are causing our Class A's from the ground. We are always looking for trends, be that a unit trend or an accident type trend. And it's not saying that unit might need to look at their SOP, maybe they do, but it may be that they are tasked and they perhaps maybe have too much on their plate. Not a lot of trends at the brigade level, but I think that continue to look is a key imperative. If you look at the next issue, the initiatives on the right-hand corner, to me, safety is organized into 3 really tranches of information. One is we gather information, right? We have a bunch of very, very smart people in tennis shoes that are great at crunching numbers, but I don't think they can lead a 2-man detail to the shit house. But they are very good at crunching numbers and coming up with some raw data for us to use. From there, we have some very talented team members that are dig into analytics. They dig into analytics and look for those trends that we can make a difference with in the field. Something that we see that is a reoccurring issue that is costing us resources that are needed to build readiness, which is our number 1 objective across the Army. And then from there, the third line of effort, the third category of information is deliver. So if we have a bunch of raw data, we do some analytics and say, okay, we have something that we think is important. That means nothing, that does nothing unless we deliver that to the field, and that's some of the things I'm pretty proud on. We'll show you one of our products here at the very end of the brief. All right, next slide. This is for the few of you in here that are affiliated closely with the unit. I will tell you that this new driver's training program is going to be a paradigm shift in complexity and a paradigm shift in making a difference. For most of us in here, we know this has been a hole in our game. We know there has not been the structure, the format, the requirements that are needed to have a really good driver's training program. This is going to be out on the street starting in June. One of our extremely talented CW5s there in the CRC was part of this. And I will tell you that if you need what we see as the main changes here and you're with a unit, get in touch with me or my outstanding XO, Captain Massagill, and we will forward that to you because we have 3 FACER pages which basically serve as your Frago, and we wrote it that way. So if you want to get in touch with us, we'll send that to you, and to send that out to the field would be a powerful thing that we think can make a difference for you, because this is going to be a significant change. Next slide. All right, after this, I wanted to show one example. Probably the key takeaway I think is best served after we run the video, if it'll work. I'm told about 5 seconds, so we'll go ahead and run that thing.
Lock, flight down, park brake released. Guard, please. Roger, I'm guard. Roger, roger, flash. Alright, chase log, copy norm. Check is started, 20 minutes. Engine and flight instruments, looking good in the green. Houston required transponder is coming up norm, we'll be squawking VFR. Currently and nav are as desired, rebel speak radio. I'm going to power tech performance considerations are as follows. You got 67 for IGE, 83 for OGE, VSC is 36, and your dual engines are greater than 100. 17% power margins. Alright. Clear left and above. Roger. Start blank, Apache 023 Alpha. 23 Heavy Alpha this time. Whoa, what the fuck was that? Whoa, shit. Shit. Engines are off, engines are off. 023, we are down, we had a hard landing air crew is down and safe, engines off.
All right, thank you. You can end that. Thank you very much. The one key point that I want to make is I have been absolutely amazed, again, as a ground guy there in the safety center, on how powerful and the collective energy when something happens, when there's an aviation mishap, that the entire enterprise, the 6-pack that Major General Gaylor talked about yesterday, gather and quickly take action. It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. In this instance, to me, what the Army and what the Aviation Center needs from the Safety Center is for us to go out with a small team and quickly assess, was this human error? We're waiting on that. The field's waiting on that. Major General Gaylor's waiting on it. The rest of the 6-pack's waiting on it. From there, we give our hypothesis on what we think might have happened if it's not a human error. In this case, our hypothesis with a great team led by Lieutenant Colonel Westmoreland was a sprag clutch. And then we hand that over to the aviation community, and they continue to work it to find the details. And it is absolutely incredible for someone that has been on the receiving end of having folks medevaced out, having folks do a deliberate attack for me, having folks, team members from the aviation community kind of provide me some support on some unforeseen activity. To see that at a much higher level on how they do that so effectively every time has been amazing to me. So I did think that was important to highlight to you, that that's kind of the way the Safety Center does. We go out, what was the overall cause? If it's a human error, we'll dig into that a little bit more. When it starts to transition, our hypothesis is that it absolutely was not human error, it was material error. It transferred over to that talented senior leader aviation team, and action's taken, and action has already been taken on that. I did want to highlight one ground accident because it makes a powerful point to what I was talking to you about earlier. In this instance, it doesn't matter where in the world, it doesn't matter what unit, but you had a unit that was at the wash rack after a very tough exercise. And we've all been there before at that wash rack, right? and you're wanting to go home. You're wanting to get back to the barracks. You're wanting to take a shower, and they pulled this vehicle into the wash rack, and by the time that it stopped, I'm going to say he was probably the best young soldier in that unit. Maybe the best young soldier in that unit, who everyone says he was just a go-getter. He didn't wait for anybody to tell him anything. He was leaning forward in the saddle. By the time that vehicle had stopped, he dove up under there with a sprayer and started spraying, right? Someone says you need to move a couple feet further to get out of something to let some other folks in. A young man that gets in the front of the vehicle is the ground guide, moves forward, and that young soldier under the vehicle is now dead, right? So what was the fault in the system in that? Well, as we look at it and dissect it, there was no nefarious characters out there that day. There's no evil people there. But if you had to have a general cause, there was not a leader there enforcing those standards. They had pulled some leadership away from there for a meeting, for all the right reasons, I am sure. But there was a hole in leadership, one of the three categories, right? Gumption, presence, knowledge. He was not there. He was not present. I had a litany of examples of accidents inside the Army that I could show you using that one example. And I'm not talking about going back years. I'm talking about going back a couple of weeks where soldiers lost their lives, where someone made a decision, a leader made a decision that he didn't need to be in the convoy, and they'd be fine with someone that had never been in the convoy before being in command. I think that's worth sharing with you. Next slide. So one of the ways that we are using to communicate to the field is we have come up with 8 things that we call the Evil 8, that if you want to get after some specifics, some details on what is the causal effect, what behaviors do we need to change to reduce risk, to reduce unneeded loss. These are the 8 things that we have came up with off the cuff right now. One of them, number 1, is seat belts. So I think that it is, you do not need to say many more words on is this still an issue, as long as we acknowledge this base fact. Of the 6 accidents that we have had this year that involved an occupant of a military vehicle, none of those 6 were wearing seatbelts. I'll say that again. Of the 6 accidents that we have had this year that involve occupants of a military vehicle, none of those 6 were wearing seatbelts. Amazing, right? Amazingly disappointing, amazingly sad, right? So did we have a leader that had the gumption to engage? He probably had the knowledge. Was he present at the rehearsal? Did they have a rehearsal? A movement rehearsal? And as you move on down, rehearsal kind of transitions into number 2 with 79% had a hole in mission planning. The last team that was briefing showed an example of a tremendous rock drill they were executing. I always like to think in relationship to the National Training Center rotations that most of us in this room have been on. We do a huge car right when we get there, right? A combined arms rehearsal. And they bring out the dog and the pony and the balloons and the clowns. And it's amazing. It's very effective. It's very productive. You learn a lot from the overall mission goals and to get folks out in the field. But will that rehearsal save a life at day number 3 when a platoon gets told, hey, you got 45 minutes and I want you to SP from here to go over there? It's in the middle of the night. Will that rehearsal make a difference for that move? No. What will make a difference is for that platoon leader, platoon sergeant saying, hey, we got a hasty move that we're doing up. I want to see everybody at my vehicle at 10 minutes so we can do a quick movement rehearsal. There is a hole in our game on rehearsals, and we are finding it is absolutely astronomical what a few amount of accidents happen if units choose to do one of those abbreviated type rehearsals that they should be proponents for. Go through the rest of them quickly. Driver's training, 67%, either pencil whip program, not a good program, didn't do something with it. That's powerful. A leader failed to correct a deficiency in 75% of the mishaps. 75%. We're not stretching the window on that. We're saying there was a leader there that knows something wrong, bad was happening, and he chose not to engage. Next slide. So this slide is the first for 5, 6, and 7 is focused on off-duty accidents. And the key takeaway here, if you look at the numbers, you'll say, well, that's kind of interesting that they happen on those times. that's kind of interesting that people make mistakes when they're off duty with speed. That's kind of interesting that they're drinking and driving and failure to wear seatbelts, misconduct. That's interesting, but how do I go about facilitating change, changing behavior inside an organization? And that is all about counseling. That's all about that first line leader having complete ownership of the people that he is in charge of, and having a relationship with them where they sit down and they talk about, what are you doing this weekend? Where are you going? And I think if we're not careful, there's a tendency in our Army that no matter how good you are as a commander, Colonel Waters is a great commander inside Germany, awesome, had a great reputation, but if he thought he was really making a huge difference when he gathered his formation before him as a brigade commander, said, listen all ye, let me bequeath my information to you. I'm going to make a difference. It didn't happen. It did not happen. What does have a chance is that first line leader absolutely counseling and being engaged with his subordinate, being engaged with the people that he is in charge of. Next slide. We have started a few months ago, we wanted to have a detailed discussion with the safety culture inside of units. As we were going to PCC and having the opportunity to brief there, they seemed to be very intrigued with the concept of what do we think helps promote a safety culture inside an organization. So we came up with these 10 topics, and I've since got me a talented aviator to proofread my stuff, Captain Massagill. We're going to put out a little article on it, but we've been briefing this for a while, and these are things that a unit should look at to perhaps establish a safety culture, or to enhance, or to grow, to expand, you put in the word you want, the safety culture inside their organization. We'll touch on these quickly. One is enforce accountability. I had a meeting at the National Highway Traffic and Safety Association a couple months ago, and these are the folks that are in charge of the nationwide programs on safety. And I was getting a brief, and the brief after the brief, where they basically said, was the most interesting, where they basically said, listen, we got some pretty good programs here. We got some good acronyms that we make. We put some stuff on TV. We get some of our people promoted because we got some really good ideas. But the only thing analytically that we see is really making a difference, and statistically it proves it not to be, and that is the variant of punishment. And in the civilian world, that is about a ticket. That is about going to jail. That is about a fine. That is accountability in the civilian world. For us, we have a lot wider aperture than that. But are we doing all we should to enforce accountability when we have those gross violations, or are we trying to be good guys and not do that that allows complacency to perhaps sneak in? That transitions to the next point, establishing red line rules. I think that's something that we can look at as units. We've already talked about a couple of topics already. You know, if you go back in time and turn the clock back, clearly one of my red line rules in my organization would be, you got to wear seatbelts, or I'm going to give somebody some paper. Right? That's about accountability of a red line rule. A little bit draconian perhaps, but we need that level. Seek information on the safety culture. We have several programs that are out there. One of them is called the ARAP, and we have looked at it from numerous venues. This is a test that you take online in your unit. Units that score better on this test do better in regards to safety. And this test is a requirement. That's an example of getting feedback from your unit, and it's a requirement for all battalion formations. If we have safety professionals inside our brigades and we aren't asking them to go and give us feedback out, we're missing an opportunity to get feedback on our organization. Analyze and share near-miss information. I've always thought that was one of the main catalysts from knowing a good unit from a bad unit. A bad unit will walk by an accident and go, holy crap, I'm glad that didn't happen, and they'll keep on walking, wiping sweat off their brow, right? A good unit takes something like that, and aviators probably are definitely at the tip of the spear on this. They say, wow, something bad almost happened. Let's do an autopsy on that, because for the next time, it may cost us resources. Risk reduction process, I'm not going to belabor the point on that, but we need to have something that institutionalizes what we do to reduce risk inside each organization, right? You have to have something. Everybody knows the categories, control measures, risk, who's the approval authority. We knew all those, but we have to have a system at the unit level that they all see the same thing, that they are doing the same thing, and that the format doesn't change, because in times of an extremist situation. Remember we talked about in that first slide? We are about reducing risk given our training and operational requirements. What allows us to do that is consistent repetition in a lot less volatile and a lot less extremist type situation. Rehearsals, we talked about that. Number 6, teach soldiers how to counsel. Going back to the point previously on how important counseling is, I've always thought there was a huge hole, and TRADOC is doing some great work to reduce that hole, but we do not do a good job of teaching that first line leader how to counsel. We're expecting that corporal, that guy at the end of the spear that's really in charge of those 2 or 3 kids, to have some outstanding communication skills. And until recently, we were expecting him to have those outstanding communication skills without really any level of training or effort to teach him how to counsel. That's not a conversation that's easy to have. Evaluate driver's training licensing program. I will tell you that an inordinate amount of our vehicle accidents are caused when that person has to apply pressure to something inside that vehicle for the first time and they've never done it before. So if you are a young PFC, you're licensed, you got a pretty good driver's training program, you've done pretty well, you're out there, have you ever really applied the brakes on something that big on the road? Often the answer is no, you haven't. So we have to work inside our venues, inside our training opportunities to come up with some system that allows that soldier to put himself in an extremist situation and know what the capacity of that vehicle is going to be. Some of the work that Major General Gaylor is doing with that with the aviation, I think there's some spin-off that we should be looking at for the ground as well for the driver's training program, because you're not going to have too many people that's going to get to go out and really crank the brakes down on an LMTV that's pulling a trailer, right? It's not practical. So we need to come up with some system that allows them to do it, because we're losing soldiers by him not having appreciation of something that weighs that much going 40 miles an hour, why you need 60 yards. An out-of-the-box safety initiative and leader engagements that we talked about. All right, next slide. All right, this is my last slide, and this is one of the things that we're talking about on venues, on delivery method, and this is our website that we have on there. I think anything from ARAP, articles. Colonel Waters is an amazing writer, and he usually has something posted on there. But anything that we find interesting to the field, plagiarism is the biggest form of flattery. We'll pull that thing from wherever we find it, put on this website, and we put an inordinate amount of effort on this website to make it user-friendly, right? To make it helpful. All right, that concludes my presentation. I got time for one question, I think, and I hope it's an aviation question so I can defer it to Colonel Waters.
Oh, we got one. Oh, we got here. I think he gets priorities.
Yeah, I got to get back at you for the little cyclic joke there. Hey, we've done a lot of work in the near-miss videos, and to kind of toot your horn a little bit, I mean, you guys have been phenomenal in that, because we try to measure Class C accidents and also those near misses that really would have been a Class A but for inches and seconds. Yep. We're trending positively in air. Do we have a sense of where the ground mishaps are trending in Cs, and is that what we're focusing to attack at?
Sure, that's a great question. So one of the few holes that I see there in the CRC is our capacity from our IT system to do functional analytics, to really take all of those Bs and Cs and assimilate those and then come up with valuable data that comes out of it to come up with any trend indicators between those and A's. So the very simple attempt to do that we do, we haven't really done any distinct crosswalks that said, hey, because this unit had an enormous amount of C's, then that leads him to have an A. We think that's true, but we haven't been able to prove it. And that, coupled with the fact that every change of command is every 2 years, it makes it a little more problematic. But sir, the question is great. We are hoping that ASMIS 2.0 is really going to help close that loop, because your question is spot on with where we need to go. We're just not there yet, in all honesty.
Got one more quick one right here, maybe?
Yeah.
Hello, sir. I'm Paul Morris from the United Kingdom. So can I invite you to talk a little bit about risk appetite, the appetite to take risk and manage risk, and whether you've seen any trends in your time over any risk adversity that might be out there in your world. Thank you.
That's a great question. I think that's a valid question. I will tell you that from my foxhole, I have not. I think for most of the folks that you see inside this room that are leaders, they understand we live in a dangerous world and we are expected, like we talked about earlier, to move big, large things around that are designed to kill people. There will never be a point where the risk is going to be zero. I've always not enjoyed it, but it's been in different forums, I have a little analogy where I say, okay, I remember when I lost a couple of guys in Afghanistan on my last deployment there, when they said, what could we have done to reduce this risk? You know, get my ass out of Afghanistan is the main way you're going to reduce that risk. Given that's not going to happen, given that shouldn't happen, right? We, I think, as an Army, do a good job saying, okay, we can't become risk adverse because on those episodic points of conflict that's going to happen in the future, if you turn the dial down now on that continuum of safety, that dial, it is without a fact, that dial, you will pay that price when you find yourself in conflict because it will spike up. That's a great question. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ted. Well done.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Wow. I got to tell you, there's a lot in that briefing, and it will be up on the website, so you may want to take some time to go back and look at it. Now.